AJ, how's it going?
Great. How are you doing, Tyson?
I'm good. For those who are listening, here with AJ, CEO of Hover, as we sort of have this discussion around celebrating veterans on Veterans Day, just wanted to kind of hop into how you and I met really briefly. I don't know if you remember that, kind of way back in 2016.
I do.
Maybe just a few words on how we were connected and kind of like the power of that network that we were connected through.
Ross is my co-founder, as you know, Ross Hangenbrock, former SEAL. So, I guess the power of the network, like, in retrospect, feels like crazy serendipity, just me even meeting Ross, right? I met Ross in the fall of 2009 when I was home from the Middle East only 3 months. And a mutual friend said, hey, you just got done with being in the Marines, and I know this guy who was a SEAL, and he's trying to do some software stuff, and you may like each other at a minimum. You should connect. And fast forward years, and we started to grow a company when I met you through Ross.
Maybe just to, I think everyone at GV kind of knows what Hover does, but maybe they don't know sort of where Hover's at and where Hover's going. So maybe just really quickly, what's the mission statement today as far as you see it, and kind of where are we going in the next, 2-3 years? Yeah,
look, so fundamentally, Hover is building a marketplace. I think when we pitched you and your partners back in 2017, we had a product that was a fairly point product that I would just say we would call it measurements as a service, right? You download our app, you walk around a building and use our app to scan around an object, and we would generate a structured digital model of the building from that scan. And so we offered that product as a service to anyone who needed data on buildings. So contractors who are doing work on a building, insurance carriers who are scoping a claim and need to know what it would cost to repair it, those kinds of use cases. They're basically using that data to scope projects and order material and scope labor to do work. And so we've been able to expand the software to connect the buyer and the seller and actually allow commerce to happen in our platform. So people now scan a building and answer a couple of questions, and they have a bill of materials of the project that they need done on the building, and with a buy now button directly in the app.
And that's where we are today, building a big company that, that has the potential to be $1 billion company, $1 billion plus company. But taking it back to the beginning, I think that's interesting because I think initially it was more DoD focused.
Yeah. I guess the origin story is like this amalgamation of my background. I was a computer engineer out of college and worked in tech for the first 5 years after college before the Marine Corps. And then I was a grunt. I was an infantry officer in the Marine Corps, which kind of culminated in a deployment to Ramadi in 2009, where I was, planning and running missions. Come back, get out of the Marine Corps a few months later, and Ross introduced me to some engineers that were basically using 3D math and 3D reconstruction techniques to analyze photos, imagery, and extract 3D data and generate 3D models of space. And so, of course, my mind at the moment, having just gotten back from being in the business of planning missions, went to that use case.
So sort of like mapping the battlefield for sort of like planning purposes, mission planning purposes. Yeah.
So DoD and the intelligence community were able to leverage our stuff to, certain kind of tip of the spear organizations to have a better way. There wasn't really anyone doing this, and so our small team that had built, I think, in retrospect, what would be a real proof of concept. It was better than the alternative, and those entities were willing to take a risk on us.
One thing that I'm incredibly proud of, to be involved with the company is how you've been able to hire veterans, not only hire them but develop them. I think there's good intentions around Silicon Valley, around the Bay Area, around hiring vets. A lot of the complaints that we hear is we don't know how to sort of map this resume from the military to a set of skill sets that we need in the workplace in tech.
If you think about qualities that you can see in spades with a certain subset of folks with the military experience, like there's an element as an individual contributor, setting aside formal leadership of basically grit and follow through, right? I mean, if nothing, the military sort of rewards the behavior of being given a job and finding a way to get it done. Meaning they're not engineers, they're not trained to write software, but through sheer force of will and sort of a complete understanding of like, hey, if I just go through the process and do the training, I'll eventually figure it out and I'll grind my way to knowing how to do it. We have people who left the Marine Corps as sergeants, didn't go to college, willed themselves into a CS program at Stanford and taught themselves the skills, and then came to Hover as a junior engineer. And then through some combination of grit plus the leadership stuff they had as a sergeant, they've climbed the ranks faster than anyone in that organization. So that's one example.
And so specifically,
I'm talking about the guy who runs my engineering program.
Right, your VPN. Right? So what's his name? Yeah. What do you do in the military? Just give his whole background real quick.
Yeah, so Will Castillo. Will went from first intern at Hover at age 19, his first summer out of Stanford CS, to 3 years later graduating and taking an entry-level engineering job, and then fast forward 7 years, and now he's running a team of 110. Anyone who hasn't had a military experience, it could probably feel kind of daunting looking at a resume and not really understanding what it means, and even if they might be able to kind of roughly try to imagine, this person was a submariner, or this person was an infantryman, like, okay, I kind of know what a submarine is, or I kind of know what boots and rifles are. They can't really imagine how there's a lot of fear in dropping someone with an experience like that into a role managing a team that's running an HR organization or IT or a product team. I guess I would kind of start with the kind of grit and follow through that I talked about earlier. If that's there in an interview process, and if you're not interviewing for those qualities outside of military people, then you should take a look in the mirror on that too. Like that, those are the most important qualities in my view, and those are the qualities we look for, regardless of your background. We try to suss out the level of grit and persistence that people have, which usually is linked to the passion they convey about their interest in your company. If those things are there, then the person you're hiring is way more likely to succeed. And I think what you'll find is, as you interview people with military experiences, you'll see a disproportionate amount of that grit, follow through, persistence, and then kind of focus on the mission in those interview processes. And so don't be afraid to just take someone who maybe doesn't have much experience in a discipline, but appears to have all those attributes in spades, because you can figure out the learning of the discipline. You can figure out how a certain thing, and if your team's strong, you can learn from your team. What you can't teach is that grit, follow through, persistence, natural leadership, and then learn leadership skills that come from those military experiences. So I guess the short answer is, like, just take the risk, like do the interviews, bring those people in, even though you don't understand exactly how their experience fits to the role. If they're applying for the role, give them a shot and run them through that process and press them on the same kinds of attributes that you care about in the soft skills you're looking for in non-military candidates. And I think you'll see a disproportionate amount of it in those candidates.
What are the takeaways that we should have as we think about how to develop people within an organization with the military background?
The Marine Corps, and I suspect the military more broadly, believes pushes this concept of like mission accomplishment and troop welfare, and how they're both important, and how and there's something contrarian, which is most people would think, like, because there's this sort of movie star idea of Marines don't leave anyone behind, like they would think that that troop welfare is more important than mission accomplishment. And in fact, the Marine Corps, and I think, again, probably the military at large, would say, actually, no, the opposite is true. Not because the mission's more important than humans, because humans are sacrosanct and the humans are the most important thing, but because the humans are united behind the mission. And if the mission is central to the goal, and everybody thinks that's the most important thing, then of course, not only are you more likely to accomplish a mission, but like you build the strongest teams that way. People from the military who have lived that culture, they're drawn to that. And so they're drawn to challenges. They're drawn to you giving them a tough thing to do and saying, find a way to figure this out.
In the submarine force, they say there's a culture of ruthless self-assessment. We're always auditing procedures and operation of the reactor plan, or just how we operate on mission. and someone on your team is auditing you, and it's probably your friend, and they're being ruthless about every mistake that you're making, what you could do better. And there's no nothing personal.
Personal, right?
Right. We're trying to get better. And the one thing I love about the board meetings that we've been in, the first slide you have says the good, the bad, and the ugly, which means that 2/3 of that slide, almost always, is what's going wrong with the company, right? Like,
yes.
And I've always loved that. There's no fluff. You're super humble about the good things that you've achieved, and that takes 1/3 of the slide. And then 2/3 of the slide is what we can do better. And I've always really appreciated that about the way you run the company.
Thank you. I'm very, as you know, very lucky to have a team that is as or more ruthless than I am, right? And so they keep each other honest. If anything, I think one of the things I have to work on and my team has to work on is actually even remembering to talk about the good a little bit.
Yep.
Because you're right. What you really should do is only focus on the gaps, because that's all that really matters. Like, the good is the good. It's all taken care of, right? And yet we're human, and so we have a bunch of like ruthless, ambitious people, and we want to win, and so we're focused on all the problems. But if you never take a moment to say like, okay, but like, hold on a second, like look how far you've just traveled. Like look at where we were a year ago, and this is something that we're not great at, but just a little bit pays off a lot. Just to kind of remind people again, like the mission, and that, hey, you're doing it. Like, yes, we have a lot to work on, but take a moment every now and then and look how far you've come, and just imagine if we can do that again. That's also like a good reminder of like, just think if we could do this again in the next 12 months. Yeah. How far, that looks like a radical path we've taken. If we could just keep this rate of improvement, we'll be here,
And maybe one more common thing about, the military. I think, one thing that I think is different from civilian jobs is that, at least on the ship or on the submarine, we were trained to run towards the fire. It's kind of like counterintuitive. There's a fire, and I'm going to run towards it because someone has to put it out.
Somebody's got to, right?
Or the whole ship goes down, right? And I think as a Marine Corps officer, there's a number of situations where you have to run toward the conflict. You have to run toward the fight instead of running away from the fight. So how does that translate into sort of your job as a CEO? Running a company in tech land.
Yeah, well, I think it's leadership by example, right? In the Marine Corps, they say like putting yourself in the cone of fire, right? When the bullets land, they kind of land in a distribution in a cone, and if you're not close to that, then you're probably not close to the point of friction. So you're not modeling the behavior you would want out of the people that have to follow you, into that moment. People will follow you if they trust that you care about them and that you're willing to do the same hard thing you're asking them to do. And if they get any sniff that you aren't willing or that you don't care about them, then why would they follow you, right? Why would they trust you? And so it's not so much, follow me and, charging forward and the lieutenant saves the day. Not at all. Like, it's symbolic. It's for them to see that you're willing to put yourself in the same place that you're asking them to put themselves. And yeah, my team's way better than I am. Like they're the ones that are going to take the hill. Like they run the company, not me, but they need to know that I'm willing to suffer as much or more than them in this tough period and get through this moment or whatever it is, stay late and help them figure it out. If I'm not willing to do that, then I have no right to be in this seat.